Today we are going to be having a look at the next step in your BIM lesson. Hopefully those of you that are keeping up to date with each of the lessons so far have got a good idea of what BIM is, but there are some of you who still need to catch up or who might be watching this a little bit later than the others, with being a little bit later than I intended. So I'm just going to do a quick recap. We have just had the 2 weeks holiday. Quick recap of what BIM is, just to make sure that people are okay with that. I'm then going to go through the BIM protocol, which was the work for yesterday's lessons, today when I'm recording this, and then I'm going to have a little quick talk about something that I need you to know about for the next set of lessons. So hopefully we're all okay with it. Hopefully we're okay with this way of the lessons. Remember, I need to know if you are struggling. I can do it slightly differently so that we do it on a voice call. I need to know if you need any extra help or anything different than this. But let's jump straight into it. So reminder, BIM, it is not one piece of software, it is a process. It is the involvement of all of the people in that design and build chain, all working together on the same documents to make sure that everything works, that there are no clashes, that there are no issues, that you don't suddenly end up with a building that's been built missing a wall. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but it's really, it could be quite crucial issues that come about if people aren't communicating and if stuff is changing and people aren't aware of those changes. So BIM is attempting to stop those issues. Okay, so hopefully you're okay with that. Hopefully you understand. Remember I said at the start we've got these ideas that you've got 2D BIM, 3D BIM, 4D BIM, which is where your Gantt charts start to come in with your timings and your orders. Your 5D BIM, which is where your costings come in, and then your 6D BIM, which has got all of that facilities management information. So like I was saying, in your design stage, you would click on a wall and you would know what that wall was going to be made out of. You would know what suppliers were going to be supplying the parts of those walls. Once the building was built, if you were managing that building, you could click on that wall if there was something wrong with it in real life, and it would tell you where you could go and get the materials to fix it and for it to be exactly the same. So it's about having that flow all the way through. Everyone always knows what is going on, what is going to be going on, what's happened in the past. Okay, we had a look at the use of BIM, and then we had a look at the digital plan of work, which was this, and we will look at this in more detail, and I'm really hoping that we will be back at school some point and I can give you one of these printed out and we can write all over it, and it will be a lot easier than having it on your screen and having to try and zoom in. Okay, so we started off in yesterday's lesson having a look at A2 in your criteria, BIM and its implementation in the RIBA plan of work, which is what we were looking at before, the digital plan of work. So we're having a look at BIM, we're having a look at this thing called the BIM protocol, which is trying to make sure that all of that can happen, and then we're going to have a look at something called the levels of maturity, and then we're going to be linking it back to, right, if you've got these different levels of maturity, and if you've got BIM happening, and if you've got the BIM protocol making sure that everyone's on the same page, and then you have the RIBA digital plan of work, you should have a project that is really efficient, really effective, doesn't have many issues, and comes out as the perfect product at the end. So the task that you should have done is, there was a document linked at the bottom of this slide, and I asked you to read through it. Yes, it was a lot of reading, it was 15 pages, but actually, you had plenty of time to be doing it, and then I just wanted some notes next to it about how it does these things. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to have a quick talk over that document and just make sure that anything that I really would have wanted you to have picked out, you were aware of. If you didn't put it in your work, I know some people did struggle with reading through and finding the points, then you can add it in afterwards. But I'm just going to go through a couple of little things and make sure that you are aware of some of the really important bits that I wanted you to get from this. So we're just going to pop over to the document here, and if we just pop back up to the start, okay, so it says in this document, the BIM protocol, the whole point of the BIM protocol is to make sure that there is one set of instructions, one really clear way for the clients, for the design team, for the construction team, for the building management team. There's one set of documents that make sure from start to use to handover, then use, and then end of the life cycle, everyone knows what is going on in terms of that project. Okay, so if we looked here where it says how the project works, it says the primary objective of the protocol is to enable the production of building information models at defined stages of a project. So all that's saying is that if you use the protocol, if you use the advice in the protocol, if you use the documents that are attached to it, and you do it at certain times and you refer back to it and you keep checking it and you make sure that it's all set up at the start, then you will have a good project and you will be able to have a BIM project a lot easier. So it's just about trying to make sure that there's one set of rules that everyone's looking to make sure that those projects are BIM enabled, are to BIM standards, and are doing what you're aiming to do in this, having everyone working cohesively together in a way that makes it successful. Okay, I say okay like you're going to answer me. It does talk about here, talking about some of the standards that it will say to make sure that you're following those standards, and it's talking about the fact that everyone involved in the use, the production, or the delivery of those models are required to have a BIM protocol added to their contract. So what that is saying is that it doesn't matter what part you are playing in that project, if you are anything to do with a BIM enabled project, then that protocol needs to be in your contract. You need to be aware of what you should be doing as far as that protocol is as far as that protocol says. You need to make sure you're following what it's saying, and you need to be making sure that as far as your role goes, you're doing what you should be. And that protocol should make it really clear to do it. Employers should be able to pop it into employees' contracts and into their working requirements dead easy, and the employers themselves, or the contractors, or whoever it is, should be able to know, right, if I look at that, I know what I as an individual should be doing. Hopefully you're following with me. If you're not, go back, listen to me again. If you still don't understand me, contact me. Okay, so let's keep moving on. So it talks a little bit here about how it is incorporated into contracts, and what it's basically saying is that if you're trying to write up any kind of contract between the employer and the project team members at any stage in that, you should be looking at what the BIM protocol says to make sure that those contracts are nice and clear for what everyone should be doing. Okay, what it's saying here is that at separate appointments, if you're changing members of the design team, members of the build team, then you should be going back and looking at the protocol again. It's saying here that on a design and build project, you're going to be at the start, your BIM is going to be to do with the design team, and then when your contractors and your builders come in, it's then going to change, and they are going to have to be part of that process as well. So they are going to have to become part of that protocol. Their work, their responsibilities is going to have to come from what that protocol is saying. Okay, so all that's saying really is that it doesn't matter who you are in the job role, your contract needs to make sure, their contract needs to make sure it's following those BIM protocols, following those rules. Hopefully you're keeping up with me so far. An important bit in here, and if we look back at this thing, it says about how the BIM protocol enables digital technology design. Well, it enables it by making sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone knows what they're doing, everyone is aware of who's got control of certain things at certain points, what software they're using, where those files are going to be. So it enables that digital technology design because everyone knows what is going on with that model. Where it talks about embeds key product and asset data, I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's this bit here where it says about managing information throughout the project. Okay, if everyone is aware of who's got control or who's doing what at what stage, they're going to have a better understanding of how that information is being managed. And if we look here, it talks about this bit here where it says IPR. It's on about intellectual property rights. Okay, when we're talking about this design and build process, that designer has created something. It is their intellectual property, but it is going to become someone else's building in reality. So we're looking at a change in who owns the rights to that building, to the design, to that intellectual property as it goes along. One of the really important things to do with BIM is that protocol clearly sets out what provisions need to happen for that intellectual property rights to make sure that all of the team members are protected against any kind of backlash, any kind of infringement. What it's saying there is that if you come up with an idea and you've got intellectual property rights to it, it's saying that even though that is shared between everyone else on that BIM, everyone else who's got access to it, if you've got the intellectual rights, the protocol will have made it yours. It will have made it very clear this person has got the rights to that model. It is their project. You can't just walk away with it just because you've got a copy of all the documents. The client can't suddenly go, thanks architect, I really like what you've done, but I'm now going to take it to another architect. I'm going to take your design, I'm going to take all of your intellectual property because I've got access to it as well, and I'm going to get someone else to do it all. I'm going to get someone else to go and pretend that it's theirs. They can't do that. One of the risks if you are sharing your own work this much is that that could happen. The BIM protocol protects those people and protects their work. Okay, so it's really important where it says here about manages information throughout the project life cycle. It's not just about managing the access to it and making that easier, it's also about protecting the people whose ideas are being used. Okay, so that's a nice important bit in there that I would have wanted you to have spotted. Okay, let's have a look at what else it's got in here that I wanted you to spot. Level of detail we will come back to. Okay, change management here, so what that's talking about is that obviously if you've all got access to the same document and everyone's making changes constantly to that document, you run the risk of something being changed and potentially it then being changed again by someone else, but the first person isn't aware. Or maybe a conversation happens between two people, the third person isn't part of it, changes are made and that third person isn't aware. What it's saying here is this protocol is putting together rules so that if anything does change, employers should try and ensure that procedures are consistent across all project team agreements. So what it's basically saying is that if something's going to change or if there's going to be any editing to those models, everyone needs to be aware that it's happening. The point of BIM is that everyone should be aware of it, but if you're still not communicating around that actual software, so the Revit software for example, then you're not really doing BIM. BIM's about better communication and better working together. So the protocol just has some rules within it to make sure that you are doing that as you should be. Okay, so just bear with me. Well, let's see if there was anything else I wanted to show you on here. It was definitely worth having a look at some of the stuff down here. It talks about the obligations of the employer, which is probably going to be your client. It talks about the obligations of the project team manager in terms of what they have to be doing. It talks about the electronic data exchange and the use of the models. It's really important to read these because when I'm saying the BIM protocol sets out rules for who can do what and what can be done, these are the rules. These are who can do what and what can be done. So that's really important for you to have a read through these for me, just to make sure you understand what this BIM protocol does, how it is so helpful. So if we have a look back at your table here, we've touched on most of these now. Okay, but if we have a look back at this, I will just make it nice and clear as we go through. So as I said, it enables digital technology design because it makes it nice and clear. Everyone knows what they should be doing, everyone knows where they should be doing it, there shouldn't be any mistakes. If we jump down to this one, it manages that information by making sure everyone's got the right information, it's protected where it needs to be protected, it can be accessed where it can be accessed, and if any changes are happening, everyone is aware of it. Okay, and where it says using the three-dimensional computer modelling, you're talking about on your Revit. It doesn't, whether it's got the Gantt charts, the costings, etc. attached to it, that's irrelevant. What it's saying is that any changes on that 3D model, everyone's aware of it, everyone knows. Okay. Provides an information repository for digital data project information throughout a design and construct project with the capability to manipulate to produce information and support information sharing. Okay, so what that's saying there is if you've enabled this digital technology design, if you've made sure that everyone knows what they're doing and where they're doing it to make sure that BIM's working, if you're managing the information and making sure that everyone's sharing it successfully and using it properly, then you've got this information repository that's got all of the digital data that everyone can access, everyone can edit, everyone can work on, everyone can take from what they need, they can put in what they need to. It's just a more seamless project if it's followed through on this protocol. If it's part of everyone's job and they understand what they need to do, you're going to be doing this. Okay, the other two are slightly more complicated. It's fine if you struggled with them, I'll go through now. Where it says about embeds key product and asset data in all project stages, this is where I was talking about adding in your Gantt charts and your costings and your suppliers and your part numbers and your sizes, all of those kinds of things. Their logic here is if it is a smoother and if it is a more efficient process anyway, you'll be able to put in that extra information. You'll have the time to, you'll have the desire to, you'll want to make a really good quality model that can provide all of that product and asset data at all of those stages. So in the design stage, you've got all the concept parts. When it comes to sourcing those suppliers, you've got that information in there. And like I was saying, once the building's in use, the building managers can look in there and they can get the support, they can get the suppliers if they need that. Because the idea is you want to produce unified information output for the client at handover. So when you hand over to your client, if you've got a BIM project, you're not just giving them the building or the bridge or whatever it is that you've designed using BIM, you're giving them all of the information that they will ever need to keep that going, to fix it if anything happens, and if necessary as the client, to replicate it in the future. And that's all it is. If we were to give one overarching answer for this, the point of the BIM protocol is to make sure everyone knows what they're doing, the process is super smooth, and that BIM is more than just we share this model. It's so that BIM is about everyone being integrated, working together, being cohesive, and that it's a smooth, successful, efficient project. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully if you struggled with the previous lesson, that now makes sense and you can see where those notes are in it, or you've used what I've just said and you've added your own notes in there. You do need to know about this BIM protocol bit moving forward. If we jump to this bit here, when my computer pays attention to me, if we jump to this bit here, which is your assignment, okay, it talks about describe the application of the RIBA decal stages in a BIM-enabled design and construct project, and describe how the CDE supports a BIM-enabled design and construct project. Although that part there doesn't say BIM protocol specifically, you will be being asked to apply that in there because the BIM protocol pushes you towards the stages of the decal to make it more efficient. Okay, so you are going to need to be referencing that BIM protocol in your assignment. Okay, so again, hopefully at this point you understand what I'm saying, you're happy with what I'm saying, you've not got bored of listening to me talk. I know you've probably had a good month of not listening to me talk, but hopefully you're on board with what I've just been saying. As I was saying, go back over, re-listen if you're stuck, contact me if not. I'm more than happy, no one's asked yet, but I'm more than happy to be doing voice calls, stuff like that to help you get this. I know it's difficult, and it's more difficult when you're stuck at home and you're trying to motivate yourself. So hopefully you understand. Hopefully you're good with what we've just said, because we're moving on now. Okay, so we're going to move on to something called BIM maturity levels. Okay, and I apologize that this is a little blurry. It might be a bit better on your screen to see it, but this diagram here is really, really useful at just showing you the different levels of BIM. Okay, important to note at this point, and jot yourself a little note down if you need to, because there's a risk of these two things getting confused. We've got levels of maturity and we've got levels of detail. Okay, we're not talking about the detail in the project at the moment, we're talking about the levels of BIM's maturity. So if we start with level 0, this is where it's going to be the most obvious. This timeline here isn't accurate, you know, it's just giving some kind of basis for you to try and help you, but I will refer to it. So if a project is BIM level 0, they want you to think it's likely the type of project you would have seen if you'd gone back to the 1990s. You might have had a bit of CAD in there towards the end of that decade, but it mainly would have been focused on hand drawings with just a little bit of computer work coming through. Okay, you would have been using these two British standards here to be basing all your work on, and it probably would have been at the stages when clients, contractors, on-site teams were working with it, it would have been printed out. Okay, you wouldn't have had anyone else dealing with the electronic version once, or the original version, once the architect had done it. BIM level 1 then came in, but at this point we weren't calling it necessarily BIM. The process was just happening. At this stage, we've got 2D and we've got 3D work being done, and that is most likely going to be on CAD. Okay, at this point, you've got models being made, and you're starting to put objects in terms of structures, in terms of elements, in terms of your mechanical and your electrical systems. You're starting to put those into your drawings. You're not doing it to a major level at this stage, but it's starting to come in. It's starting to get a bit more developed. And a couple more standards are then being looked at. So you can see now there's 4 main British standards that are being looked at. Okay, and what you're dealing with at that point then is you're sending the actual files to the different people. Now, when you send that file, it's the same as me sending you a PDF. Okay, you can't edit that PDF if I send you it. Now, I've shared this PowerPoint with you. If you wanted to, although it would be weird, I will just put that out there before anyone does it. If you wanted to, you could go on and you could edit it, or you could change it all to say BIM's rubbish. Okay, if anyone does, I'll hunt you down. Okay, we're not talking about that at this level 1. We're talking about sending a file that no one can change. No one's doing anything to it. If they save it themselves and make changes to it, no one else can see that. Okay, so it's really individual. You're not working together. You might have a bit of collaboration in terms of you're all looking at the same file, and I could make a change on it and then I could send it to someone else for them to have a look at, but they'd still have to make a change on the master copy. Okay, so then BIM level 2 came in, and if you remember back to my original lesson, I said that a couple of years ago the government said that all government projects had to be BIM level 2. They recognised that there just needed to be a little bit more cohesion between all of the different people to make sure something was working. Okay, ignore the bit here that says point solutions, and then this part here, that's because I've taken it from a company. Okay, and this BIM hub bit here. So BIM level 2, we're talking about the last decade, okay, the one that we've just left. We're talking about the advancements there. So these models, these objects, they've got more advanced. You've started to link in a few more things. You've started to make it so that you're getting more information from your projects. We've got a few more British standards that have come in, and in terms of what you're ending up with, you're having files being sent around that may be editable. Okay, you might be able to make changes between each other, and you've got the creation of libraries, so you're clicking on things and it's taking you to a wider amount of information that is shared between those companies. So we're starting to get more of this collaboration coming in, where there is one design and people are able to make changes to it. Okay, so same as this PowerPoint. I've sent you all this PowerPoint. If I asked you all to do a slide about BIM levels and maturity, you could add those slides in. If you spotted a spelling mistake on one of my slides, which we know is likely, you could go and you could edit that. Okay, it's not perfect. I might miss some of those changes, but there's a lot more back and forth in terms of what could be done. And then the idea is that we're moving towards BIM level 3, and they're hoping from this decade on this is going to be happening. And the idea is that we get to a stage where the majority of projects where you've got multiple people involved in it become BIM projects. Okay, and the idea of this is it's interoperable data. So everyone is working with that exact same data. They're doing things to it. Everyone's aware of it. It's this efficient process that we keep going on about it. And you'll see that the standards change at this point, and we go to standards that have got I in front of them, and these are international standards. Okay, up to this point we're working with British standards. We're keeping it nice and singular. We're keeping it with what we know. Okay, here we're looking at making sure that actually we are on a global level with the standards. We are applying ourselves to international standards. And the idea of this is, if we sort of look at this diagram and take it in a little bit of an out of the box kind of way, is everyone has got access to everything. Everyone can work with everything. Ideally at this point, no one is making mistakes. No one is confused about what's going on. Everyone is on the same page with all of the information that they need access to, whether it's costing or timings or suppliers or sizes or whatever it is, you've got access to it at all times. Okay, and that's the idea in terms of BIM. You will find projects now that are BIM level 0. You will find projects that are BIM level 3. You'll find projects at all levels of those maturities. You'll find some that start at 0 and maybe just pop into 1 because they need something extra. You'll still find them at all of those levels. That's why I said this timeline is a little bit iffy, but it was just giving you an idea of the majority were moving towards BIM level 2 at this point in the 2010s, and we're aiming now in this decade, 2020 onwards, assuming that construction doesn't struggle too much with what's happening at the moment, we're aiming to be moving forwards into this BIM level 3 for the majority of projects. Okay, so hopefully, as I've just said, you're on board with what I'm saying. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Fingers crossed. If you don't, rewatch it, listen through it again, contact me if you still don't understand. So in terms of the task that I want you to do, obviously I want you to make sure that this table is nice and detailed. If I went over anything else that you're going to need, add it in. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to be checking whether you've used my information or your own. I want you to do your own copy of this drawing. Obviously, if you're doing it on a computer, you could just copy and paste it. But the reason I'm asking you to maybe do your own copy of this is, one, we don't need the drawings at the bottom. But two, I've got 2 links down here for you. Okay, I want you to go on to those and I want you to add the detail that goes along with this. You can take it from what I've said, that's fine. But if I go on to here, for example, so it says level 0 BIM, unmanaged computer aided design, including 2D drawings and text with paper-based or electronic exchange of information. Okay, what I really want is in here, it talks about the exchange of information. It talks about who's got the information, and it does a little bit more on the other one. I want you to take this drawing, do it yourself, take that diagram, whatever, and I want you to go through and I want you to add notes to the levels of maturity. What I then want you to do, and this will all be on the show my homework, so don't panic. What I then want you to do is for each of these standards on here, I just want you to jot down a couple of bullet points, nothing detailed, nothing massively over the top. I just want you to jot down a couple of bullet points about what they are, what they cover, what they aim to make sure, what they're responsible for. Just want a few bullet points about each of those standards, just so if I say IFC, you know what I'm on about. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully we shouldn't have too many questions, but again, if you are concerned or you do have any questions, please contact me. Thank you very much.